Thank you, Mr. President. I know I've got a couple hundred letters from business owners today. I think, Mr. President, it's time to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff on a little bit of these issues. How many jobs are going to exist in the state of New Hampshire if there are no more employers? How is this body going to continue to raise taxes if there's no employers by which to tax? How will we pay for the 160,000 government-paid, taxpayer-funded employees if there are no employers to tax to raise the money for businesses? Mr. President, it's a discouraging day to sit here and listen to what has truly become the war on employers. And this has got to stop in this body. This war on employers, which is looking to give a 13% pay raise to the unemployed by taxing employers, looking to give a 10% increase in the workers' compensation system by taxing employers. We're looking at 30 to 60% increases this year in health insurance costs, which is being borne by the cost of employers. We're seeing property taxes across the state skyrocket again. People are paying those. We see a gas tax, which ironically my good friend from Senate District Number 4 just complained about rising gas taxes when he voted for it. We see increases in the cost of schools, which come from taxes. We see increases in our desire to make a green energy system, which comes from taxes. Mr. President, I submit to you, when does it stop? We know from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we have 700,000 people working in this state. Less than 5,000 of them work at minimum wage. Over 50% of them are under 25. High school kids trying to earn a couple bucks. People are trying to raise some money to go to work. To go to college, I apologize. The Bureau of Labor Statistics specifically showed that none of those remaining earners, none of those remaining workers were primary wage earners. You know, part of me, Mr. President, is very concerned. You might remember we saw an article in a national newspaper, I think it was the New York Times, about 3 months ago, which specifically suggested that this conversation about the minimum wage has very little to do with minimum wage, and very much to do with a national trend that we're seeing of unions tying their contracts to the minimum wage. This is a bill that looks to provide a 24% increase, Mr. President, a 24% increase to the minimum wage. You find a steel worker making 75 bucks an hour. Is this what this is really all about? The way we improve our society is to allow for economic growth. The way we raise all boats is to allow for the economic opportunity that our families created and founded. It is not by continuing to raise the bar to the point on businesses so that they cannot exist anymore. And Mr. President, I'm reaching that point where I'm concerned about that. Because we see tax after tax after tax, fee after fee after fee, and there's only so much that people can afford to pay. I heard arguments relative to the fact that in the 1950s and the 1960s, people could live on a minimum wage. Even though today, again, Mr. President, I submit to you less than 5,000 people are on it out of 1.3 million people in our state. In 1950, Mr. President, I don't think our real estate taxes were this high. I don't think our gas taxes were this high. I don't think our property taxes were this high. I don't think it cost millions of dollars to build schools and $40,000 to send a kid to the university system. If we believe that we have a challenge, that we need to raise minimum wage because the cost of living is too high, maybe we should be talking about lowering the cost of living by cutting taxes. It's so difficult for us to try and have this every single way. Mr. President, I am someone in this business. We talk about the hospitality business, and I know that the great senator from District 13 never made minimum wage, because I'm sure she was a phenomenal waitress and always excelled in that position.
Flattery would get you nowhere.
Rolling at the end of the day in her tips. Well, there's been much discussion relative to the fact of the industry, looking at this industry as an industry that needs to make an increase in the minimum wage. And Mr. President, I submit to you, in that industry, I have heard from no restaurant owner, no employee, no one that suggests that how that wage scheme is implemented, that they make minimum wage. In fact, they're excited the fact that if they work hard, if they succeed, if they do good at their job, they make significantly more than minimum wage. I really hear people come in and suggest that I'm going to work at minimum wage to make less. Where's the incentive in our life for that? Where's the incentive for people to do better and to grow and to excel? I hear, Mr. President, this need that Connecticut has higher minimum wage than New Hampshire, that Maine has a higher minimum wage than New Hampshire, that Massachusetts has a higher minimum wage than New Hampshire. And Mr. President, I ask you, why are taxes overall higher in Connecticut? Why are taxes higher in Maine? Why are taxes higher in Massachusetts? I hear that Connecticut has a higher minimum wage, and Maine has a higher minimum wage, and Massachusetts has a higher minimum wage, but yet New Hampshire has a higher level of wealth. Mr. President, I submit to you that there are some contradictories there. This is a state that prides itself on people working hard and succeeding. It should not be a place that continues to pride itself on the legislature that continues to want to raise the cost of living for employers and businesses so they can't afford to live here anymore. With that, Mr. President, again, I respectfully ask that we maintain the ITL. Thank you.